welcome back. In this next lesson, we're going to talk about designing a business model. You can also consider it a lesson on redesigning a business model if it's something that you already have. The business model canvas is an excellent tool for helping you understand your current business, redefine that business, or design something completely new. The process is relatively simple but really powerful, and I'm going to describe to you a system that I use with teams to get a new business model out onto the table and something that you can actually test with real customers. So once you have this business model canvas, once you've gone through this process, you don't implement it. I just want to make that clear that your goal is to get a testable business model, something that you can get in front of customers, in front of prospects, in order to test each component of the business model, and especially the revenue and pricing model that you're going to develop. I recommend that you work with a team as part of this. Now, I know that a lot of you are solo founders, or maybe you want to start a startup. Collaboration is invaluable. If you have a co-founder, that's fantastic. If you don't, then find advisors, find mentors, find somebody that you can work with to bounce ideas off of. And I've even been in situations where you can have your customers help you, or early customers, people that believe in you, people that have domain expertise or maybe expertise in the market that you want to get into that can help you develop that business model. But either way, get somebody to bounce ideas off of. I recommend that it not be a family member, it not be your spouse, but somebody who can be a little bit unbiased and challenge some of your assumptions early on. Your first step here is to gather the people that you want to work with together into a room. You can even do it at a coffee shop, but I really recommend a place where there's not a lot of distraction, because it's going to take at least a couple of hours for you just to get your head in the game. It's going to take usually about a half a day just to get your ideas on the table and go through this process that I'm going to describe. So what you want to do is, at the very beginning, if somebody's not familiar with the business model canvas, you're going to want to talk them through each of the elements. You can use that, use the business model generation book, use the website to explain it, or simply walk them through each of the steps. The next thing you're going to want to do is that if you have an existing business model, get it down on paper. So if you are going to be redesigning a model, you're going to want to get that existing model down on paper, even if you feel that it's not the best model. If you are developing a business model for a brand new business, then you're going to want to describe this visually, like what I show here, and consider that it is a hypothesis. None of this at this stage needs to be right. It just needs to be your best guess about what you think the market is, what you think the customer is, and so on. So what you're doing here is you're establishing a common understanding of your current thinking for the business. So the next step is to go through some brainstorming exercises. And there are a lot of different ways of doing this. If you're designing a brand new business model, you're going to focus on one element of the business model at a time, and you're going to have a conversation around it. Now, the process I like to use is that there's some team discussion, and usually I time box that discussion to about 10 or 15 minutes. And then each team member uses sticky notes to write down what they believe about that part of the business model. So everybody's writing down their ideas separately. And then after a certain amount of time, give them 5 minutes or so, everyone in turn goes up to the board and presents their sticky notes and just talks through it briefly. And so using this method, you can go through each of the 9 building blocks of the model individually. And team members can ask questions to, not necessarily challenges, but they can ask questions to help refine each team member's idea a little bit more. So you can always also seed the team with questions. So you can say things like, how could we do things differently? Or what are some ways of creating more value for the customers? Or how can we be more efficient? And so through this process, you're encouraging everyone to participate. You're asking a lot of questions of the team members. You're writing down everything. And an important concept of brainstorming, you may have already heard this, is that you don't judge the ideas immediately. So the challenges should be clarification questions that you ask. Later, you'll get a chance to do the judging. So one suggestion that I have is that you should be developing more than one business model. What you ideally want are a couple of different business models to compare against each other, to do testing with. because this A/B testing, whether it's for the price or whether it's the customer segment and your ability to reach a certain customer segment, is really important, because through qualitative and quantitative information, through A/B testing, you're going to be getting to the best business model possible. So if you decide that you're going to have a unified single business model, I recommend that you have discussions about the pros and cons of each different element that you're talking about. So if a certain part of the team wants a certain pricing model and another part of the team wants a different pricing model, well, keep them both on there for now, and then devise tests around that so you can show which one is truly the better idea. So I also advocate voting on the best idea. So after the business model canvas has been developed, you want to have everyone on the team vote and decide on what they think the best ones are. You can do this through a lot of different ways. I usually simply just have a voting system, and people write that down. I've done it both in secret and something that's a little more public. If you are using the Scrum Agile development process, there are different voting cards that you can use for that. So you can assign a value to the ideas, whatever works for you. But it's really a way of winnowing down some of the ideas that you have. And then you can develop a unified business model. Now again, ideally you're creating a couple of different business models from this process that you can do tests against. But what you want to do is, for each of those 2 or 3 different ideas, come up with a cohesive business model that everyone can agree on. All right, now here is where the rubber meets the road. You want to think about how you can test the different elements of the business model. Now, some elements are easier to test than others. For example, key partners. Well, how do you test what the right method is for key partners? That's a little bit tough. Certainly you can make calls to potential vendors and folks like that, and maybe do some price negotiation and do some investigation that way. But really what I'm talking about are things like the channel, the revenue model, the customer segment. So these are all very testable. So the revenue model and the price you choose, very testable. You can create lots of A/B tests around that using AdWords and so on. You can also test the channel. So you could do online acquisition versus a salesperson calling, and figure out what the funnel is for each one of those methods. So think through the different tests that you have. And by creating these tests and by creating very specific, actionable, and tests, that you're going to be able to decide what the best model is. So the next step is really what it's all about, and that is using customer development to qualitatively and quantitatively validate the business model. And we'll have a whole section later about customer development and how that works. But really what you're doing is you are getting your business model in front of people. Not necessarily on the canvas that you've devised, but in a way that the customer can understand what it is that you'll be providing to them. So, and it's only through this method that you're going to be able to get the truth about your business model. So I'm going to go into a lot more detail about this process and the customer development process, and especially about testing pricing a little bit later on. So the next step is that your team needs to meet regularly to assess what you're learning. So my recommended process is that you set up a standing weekly meeting, and later in the process it could be for 2-3 hours at a time, to discuss what you're learning in the customer development interviews and other tests that you're doing. So what you're doing is you are revising your business model as time goes on. So again, the whole idea behind burning the business plan is that the business model is a living document. The business model is something that you iterate and something that you learn from, and you do this over time, so that at the end of your process you have something that is tested and has a much greater chance of being successful. So, and just to summarize here, your steps are to describe your current hypothesis, brainstorm the improvements, develop multiple models that you can test against, that you can discuss, unify into one model, possibly even 2, use voting to do that, develop the different tests that you're going to use to test your business model, and then actually get out there and start talking with customers and begin validating it. So that's the process that I recommend you use. There are a lot of other processes for brainstorming and so on, but this one is really straightforward and really simple, and so you can get out there and start doing that today.